this year's online festival with a variety of free events for all tastes and run projects encouraging more people of all ages to engage, create and share stories in Lancaster and beyond. But we do need your help. We want you to be able to run high quality events and projects year round, and run more projects to connect with our audiences and provide paid opportunities for writers, illustrators, storytellers and lots of other artists, many of whom have faced, as we know, unprecedented times over the last year. To do this, we rely totally on donations from you, our audience. So once you've enjoyed the event, please consider donating via our website. Anything you can afford will be very much appreciated. So tonight is our very first event, and we're really excited to present to you Az, who is going to be in conversation with Jake, who is one of our board members, but also someone who knows a lot about books. And I know that you're all going to have the most fantastic time listening to them both in conversation. I was just saying before, I know lots of people that have read the book, and I know that quite a lot of them seem to be listening in tonight. So I'm hoping that they're going to enjoy it as much as I think you all will. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jake and Az, and enjoy the rest of the session. Over to you both. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. So good evening and welcome to the first part of our launch event for the Litfest Big Read. After a year when so many people have been separated from friends, colleagues and families, we wanted to explore the way that stories and reading can really help to bring people together. When we read, we connect with other worlds, other times, and other ways of seeing and understanding our lives and those of others. There is something amazing in how the same book can provoke such different responses and reactions. As readers, how many of us have reached the end of a book and felt that pang of loss or sorrow to be leaving behind the characters we love and the worlds they inhabited? During reading, how many of us have longed to stop what we're doing and just get back to the book, eager to immerse ourselves and find out what happens next? Authors, poets, illustrators and storytellers might create the stories we love, but it's in the hearts and minds of readers where they really live. The Litfest Big Read is a celebration of all of this. We have chosen two fantastic books, both of which have been very highly praised and offer the most incredible journeys for readers. And we're challenging you to read these and also to help us by spreading the word. So let's really get family, colleagues, friends, reading groups involved and celebrate what reading is and can be. So bookshops and libraries are stocking these books, and we even have the chance of a competition to win a free pass to 3 Litfest events over the next 12 months, as well as your choice of 3 paperback books. So please do join in with us, and if you haven't already, sign up for the Big Read on our website. During the event, I'm going to be in conversation with Az, and Dassu, but there will be an opportunity to ask questions yourselves too. There is an ask a question box, so if there is something you'd like to ask, please use that. And our first book that we're going to be looking at is The Brilliant Boy Everywhere by Dassu. It follows the story of Sami and his family on a journey from Damascus to life as a refugee in Manchester. It really is an extraordinary story of survival and courage, and one that makes a massive impact on the reader. It has been lauded with praise and is a book which multi-award-winning author Patrice Lawrence has described as a story that everyone should read. We definitely agree. We're very pleased to choose it as one of our 2 books for our first ever Litfest Big Read. So, without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Dassu, Az, to tell us a little about the creation of the book. So, Az, can you tell us a little bit about what Sami and his family have been through and the life that they leave behind, please?
Am I okay to give spoilers?
I think you can give some spoilers.
Okay. Well, Boy Everywhere shows the terrible journey taken by 13-year-old Sami and his family. And they go from having everything you could dream of to absolute poverty. They go across countries and continents, from a comfortable life in Damascus, flying from Lebanon, as they normally would, and they end up in a smuggler's den in Turkey, in which they are tricked into. And it's here that their illegal journey begins, and they must cross the rough seas in a small boat and then be transported in a lorry. And you really aren't sure whether they're going to make it. And when they do, they end up in a detention centre or a prison in Manchester, where they're separated. And when they're released to their friend's family home in Greater Manchester, they soon learn that things won't be as easy as they expected in the UK. And it is a story of survival, of family and bravery, and it looks at the refugee crisis in a completely new way. And through Sami's eyes, it shows that we are all one cruel twist of fate away from becoming refugees ourselves. It can happen to anyone.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And I wonder whether you'd be willing to give us a bit of a reading at this point, to give us a flavour of the book.
Sure, okay. I'll read from, it's a little bit further into the book, where they have, as I said, they've just arrived in Turkey, and they've been tricked, and they're not in a place where they're supposed to be. So we trudged through the muddy front yard and through a wooden side gate into the back. I could just about make out some iron railings. Behind them was a stone staircase which the driver led us down. Baba reached out for my hand and I took it, surprised to find Baba's was trembling. I held out my hand to Mama as she carried Sarah, and we all moved down carefully, making sure we didn't miss a step and tumble. We walked through a creaky door and into a room full of people. The driver went to speak to a tall, thin man in a language I guess was Turkish, and then nodded to Baba as he walked back out. He locked the door behind him, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Why had he locked the door? What if there was a fire? How would we get out? I looked around. Were we going to stay in this one room with all of these people? There were no windows, just the locked door behind us, and the only light and candles dotted about on the floor. We followed Baba between groups of people, trying not to step on anyone. Some lay on their backs and stared at the ceiling, while some slept. A woman rocked a baby back and forth. The room smelled tangy, of mould and smelly armpits. I tried not to breathe in through my nose, but I could still taste it in the back of my throat. Baba stopped in a corner where space had been made for us. Go to sleep for a bit, he said. Sleep? There was no way I'd be able to sleep. I leant against the cold wall looking around the room. There were so many people. I could hardly see the floor. There had to be at least 30 of us. The people became blurry. I couldn't see them clearly anymore. Tears spilled down my chin and splashed onto my jeans. For the first time since we left Syria, what we were actually doing had really hit me. We had left home. Home. Home where my bed was, my clothes, the fridge full of food, where the maid cleaned up our mess and kept everything in order. Now I was in chaos, and I had no idea how long we'd be here. A day? A week? How were we supposed to get to England from this dump? What if the only way was on a boat? My mind raced with questions, even though I didn't want to think anymore. I looked at Baba. He had his eyes shut. Sarah lay on Mama's chest, her eyes closed tight as if to block out everyone and everything. Mama's fingers glided slowly over one prayer bead, then the next. I wanted to shout and scream and ask why we were here, but I knew I couldn't. We were all in the same situation. I had to stay quiet. Mama said so. You can do this, Sami, I told myself. It'll all be okay once you get to England. And that's just before his whole life is absolutely turned upside down and will never be the same again.
Thank you so much. And I think one of the things that really shows is how much we experience as readers what Sami's going through. You know, we get to experience those senses. We also get to feel his emotions, the uncertainty and the fear. One of the real strengths of the books for me is just how convincing and compelling Sami is as a 13-year-old boy. Did you find it challenging, sort of finding his voice, and how did that happen?
Yes, it was a challenge. He was written from various observations in my own life and also from the accounts of refugees. I'd been fundraising the Syrian refugees for a while and had therefore come across stories of children making the most of playing football while stuck in camps. But it was while I was watching a specific news interview showing refugees in a muddy camp wearing Nike trainers, holding smartphones, and they were talking about what they'd left behind. And I realized how similar their lives were to ours. And I immediately knew the story that I wanted to write and that Sami would be my main character. And I wrote the whole novel quite quickly, but the real work happened while editing. I had to ensure that my language was appropriate to that of a teen and didn't sound too young or too old. When I first started writing it, my authorial voice always slipped in, but thankfully my critique group would pull me up on it. I also researched what Sami's interest would be to develop his motivations and even his guilt. So I watched videos online, and I learned that Syrians use American English, and so I was able to use words such as gotta and man, which my friend's son in Damascus does too. And also, like Sami and Boy Everywhere, we've all at some point in our lives experienced the fear of going somewhere new and finding the strength to overcome challenges. So although not always as traumatic, it's not only refugees who experience loss and uncertainty like this. Many children have to start again when they move to another house, a new school, when their parents divorce, or when they lose a loved one. And these are all experiences that I could draw on for my character. And every time I wrote a scene, I thought about how my son would feel, who was a similar age, or how I would feel in that situation. And I'd imagine sitting in an empty room, before I moved house, and that empty feeling you get when you're leaving an old life behind. And also through my work as a governor and a magistrate, I've seen how children internalize their feelings and blame themselves for the things that go wrong in their lives. So, there are countless children who think their parents fight or they divorce because of something they did that may have initially instigated a discussion, but they can't see the actual reasons behind an adult's decision or even just what is fate. And I wanted children to be able to see that none of this was Sami's fault and how it was so hard for him to see that reality. And also my son, my eldest son at the time of writing my first draft was mad about football. So he helped with all the scenes in which football is mentioned, because I know I shouldn't be telling you this, but I don't really like watching football. And I was able to draw experiences from my own cultural and Islamic traditions in which grandparents play a huge role in family life. Elders must be respected, guests, how they should be treated and fed well, and how death and fate is not something that's shied away from. So that was something that was sort of easy to put into his voice. And also my friend in Damascus, the teacher, she told me the sort of conversations that she'd had with her own children, and the sort of things that they noticed. Well, one of the examples is you'll see in chapter, when he's looking out of the window and he notices plumes of black smoke just before he's going to speak to Joseph. And, this is one of the things that my friend told me that her children would notice looking through the window, and they'd ask their mum, why is there smoke there? And she wouldn't tell them. So she really sort of confirmed to me that Sami and Sarah were like any of the children that she met herself. And thankfully, she said it was realistic and that Sami could be her own son or daughter. So yeah, that's pretty much how he was made. But slowly, lots of dripping in. Yeah.
I was interested in what you said about your son and the football. I have to say and admit, football isn't my thing either. I'm afraid, to my shame, the only time I ever scored a goal, I thought the goalposts were open and it was a home goal, and I was, persona non gratis forever in school. But do you think that having sons yourself, was that part of the reason why you chose to write this book from a boy's perspective?
Yeah, he just came to me. It was really weird. When I watched that interview, I just knew that he would be Sami. I even knew his name. But after that, I didn't know anything beyond that. I knew the overall arc of how they'd have everything, how they'd lose, go through a lot of trouble. The boat scene was in my head because obviously I'd seen it so many times on the news. And I knew that they'd struggle in the UK. But beyond that, I didn't know anything about him. And yeah, possibly because I've got 2 boys and I've got a daughter as well. And they did feed into all of that. And also I sort of observed the way that they get upset. You know, the scene where in the second chapter where Sami goes to his mum and he's badgering her about getting the football boots. I've had that. I've been working and they're like, Mum, but will you? But will you? I'm like, yeah, no, not right now. And then I'll just say yes to make them go away. So, yeah, that did feed into it.
Brilliant. You've touched on this already, but the story as a whole feels incredibly authentic and at points very, very raw. I get the feeling there was an awful lot of research involved in kind of creating this story. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I did a lot of research, and it took me a lot of years to get it to what you're reading, what you've read today. But I began by looking at articles and footage about life inside Syria. You know, I watched footage in refugee camps and interviews of children, and they were sharing their experiences of the bombing, the trauma, the bad dreams, and their hopes to live like other children. And that made me really passionate to sort of tell this story from a child's perspective. But I knew that this research wasn't enough to make my story authentic. So I watched videos online of Syrian teenagers chilling out in cafes and schools, on social media. And I looked at photos shared by Damascus on Instagram. I still do share them now again. I watched rap songs by Syrians on YouTube, just going about their daily lives, you know, playing instruments, etc. And in order to capture the English that Syrians use, I read articles and blogs on Syrian government and news websites. And then I also double-checked things with Syrian friends. And the key reason for writing Boy Everywhere was to challenge stereotypes. It wasn't enough for me to simply pick things that I felt was worthy to write about. So I asked questions, I listened, and I tried to understand what felt unfair to Syrian refugees and the way that they were represented in books and media. And I was lucky because through my fundraising, I was already aware of the stories of some Syrians, but I asked various charity workers to connect me with Syrian families who were resettled in the UK so I could personally support them. And I spent time with various Syrian families in my own community. I spoke to many refugees, some who'd spent time in detention centres, and I went out of my way to meet them in London, to hear their stories and to check that what I had said was, you know, accurate. I also connected with them via Twitter. The detention centre scenes were informed by detailed blogs. There are so many written by people in detention, and they are so upsetting. And also by refugees who I'd met who'd been detained, but also my own experience through my work in the courts, because I visited prisons, so I kind of know how they look, how bland they are, how they smell. Friends from Damascus in the UK, who are in the UK and also living there, read the book. So Nadine Kadan, who was one of your Litfest author illustrators last year, she, from Damascus, she moved to the UK after the war began, and she gave me invaluable advice about how the middle class in Damascus experienced the war. And our mutual friend, Majida in Damascus, who the teacher in chapter 1 is named after, she spent an unbelievable amount of time answering my questions and fact-checking my book. And I was really lucky. It was serendipitous that her family in Damascus mirrors the family in my novel. She's a teacher, her husband's a surgeon, they've got a son who's 12, they've got a younger daughter. So she passed the book on to her students and her son, and they gave me encouraging feedback and told me that the characters in the story could be them, and the book said what they wanted it to say. But also, as Ruth, my publisher, will attest, that even after line edits were done and proofs had gone out, I was still rechecking things in the story. And I was, you know, I would ask my friends in Damascus to send me pictures via WhatsApp of their neighborhoods to reassure me that I had got it right before it went to print. So, yeah, I did a lot of research.
Wow. Yeah, no, it sounds like a real passion project and one where you fully immersed yourself. How long did all of that take? How long did the process of creating the book take?
5 years in total to what you're seeing. I wrote the first draft in 6 weeks, but it was not very good. And the boat scene that you read that's in the middle was actually the first chapter. And when I went on submission to agents for the first time, that was the chapter that they read, and obviously they couldn't connect. There was a huge amount of potential, but they didn't know Sami yet. So then I went back and rewrote the opening and showed him for who he was and his life, and moved the boat scene into the middle. So it took a while to get it to what you're reading.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm thinking about the research again. Was there anything that made a particular impression or that stayed with you through the course of that research?
Yeah, I've met so many refugees in England who have really inspired me, and I'll always remember their stories. You know, they were doing so many sort of various jobs back home, and they were doing, you know, they're working in a completely different career here. Some of them were, you know, they're growing vegetables here because they're just waiting for the government to decide if they can live here and they can't work. You know, like Sammy's dad. Some of them were working in restaurants when they were department store buyers. But one particular story stayed with me. He was a refugee. He was an architect in Damascus, and he lived in the suburbs. And he moved here, and he was studying an MA in architecture because he had to top up his qualifications. And he told me during a workshop they were discussing plumbing. And when he shared his thoughts on how to solve a particular problem, plumbing problem, his tutor said, "How would you know? You don't have bathrooms in Syria." You know, and this man had a big house with 4 bathrooms. Now, I'd already written the book, but when I met him and was checking things with him, I was so angry. And this is why I was so passionate to really get this book out. I was desperate to share it because I wanted people to know that not everybody, you know, people aren't how you've seen them depicted to be. But I really loved also just meeting so many Syrians and hearing their stories and reassuring them that I would do my best to let everyone know that they had dignified lives and that they weren't simply victims of war or reduced to a refugee label, that there was so much more to them. And the best thing about the research has been that I've made lifelong friends in another country, and I really cannot wait to visit. I can't wait to go to Damascus. So yeah. So
that's a part of the plan, is it, to go and visit?
Absolutely. I was supposed to be going to Jordan last year, and it's only Amman, the capital, is only I think 200 to 300 miles from there to Damascus, and I was really seriously contemplating visiting because I know people that go back. You know, I know that it's not seen as a safe country, but Damascus is very much protected. So I know people, like one of my friend's husbands goes back every month for business before the pandemic, via Lebanon, of course. So yeah, I wouldn't obviously go to other areas which have been afflicted, but yeah, I want to go to Damascus and meet my friends.
Brilliant. It's interesting and kind of chilling, actually, to hear you talking about the plumbing and the bathrooms. It does feel like there's a huge number of stereotypes and assumptions around refugees and indeed Syria. Boy Everywhere really does help to dispel those. Why do you feel these stereotypes sort of took hold? Are there dangers in allowing them to go unchallenged?
Yeah. I think the media's got a lot to answer for. You know, what have we been shown for years? All we've ever seen is grey rubble on the news or refugees in rubber dinghies. And it's so easy to forget that Syria is one of the oldest civilized countries. They were developed before we were, you know, it was developed before we were. And there's this perception that they live in a distant desert country in tents, you know, only wearing robes. And not many people know that, like us, they've got beautiful hotels. You know, they've got a 4 Seasons hotel. That's a 5-star hotel that not many countries have. I didn't know that until I did the research. They've got, you know, they had KFCs before the war, Nike shops, Costa coffee shops, you know, the same brand that we have here before the war began. And I really wanted to use that information for people to connect, for readers in the UK and the US to connect to that. And everyone to sort of know that the media's focus on refugees wasn't the full story. And it was in 2015, you know, when I first started writing Boy Everywhere, and the war had already been raging for 5 years, and the description in the news was really unkind and hateful of refugees. And there were countless news broadcasts about the arrival of refugees to Europe. We were inundated with them. It was just relentless. And because of those media reports, many people assumed that refugees were poor, uneducated, and wanted to come to Europe because they'd have a better life. You know, you'll remember that Nigel Farage poster. And the focus had been on refugees not knowing English, wanting our jobs, taking our space. So I really wanted to show that actually they do know English. That's why I started the first line is it all started going wrong in English, because I wanted people to see that they have English lessons in English schools. My friend Ahmed, who's a refugee, he studied English literature at university, and he's read Chaucer, one of the greatest English writers, and I haven't, you know. So I really wanted to challenge that narrative that refugees are needy and desperate, and instead show the reality of their lives and the choices that they're forced to make, and show that it was really, really hard for them to leave home. And that if it weren't for the war, you know, most Syrians would never have left. Because who wants to leave home with just a backpack? I also wanted to challenge and highlight that Christians and Muslims live happily together in Syria, because sometimes the news can make you think otherwise. So that's why Sami's best friend Joseph is Christian. And, you know, they mention churches and mosques together, because that is how it is. I mean, I've shared recently on social media pictures of Christmas and how the buildings were decorated. And, you know, it's shocking for us in the West, isn't it, to see that, because we just aren't shown that side. So, yeah, I feel that they do need to be challenged, because it really creates that us and them mentality. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very true. And shocking is exactly the word, because these are such base assumptions that we're often making.
Yeah.
I suppose, taking that question a bit further, do you feel that fiction's a useful way to help to challenge sort of mainstream narratives?
Fiction?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, when you're reading a story, you're exploring a world that you had never imagined. You know, you're immersed into, and you learn things that you're not expecting to learn. You know, you might think a book is about a specific thing, like even a fantasy. You know, you can do it through fantasies and contemporary fiction, and you may think a book is going to follow a certain narrative, but there will be things seeded in there that you can learn that will challenge that stereotype. You know, one of the examples is, you know, showing people that people from other backgrounds or lived experiences can and do are able to do heroic things, to do extraordinary things, and you can show that through fiction. And I really love reading fiction, because when I'm reading a good book, I'm able to switch off from everything and everyone around me, and I, as I said, immerse myself into this new world, and I learn so much about others, but also about myself, because sometimes a character who is completely different to me might do something that I would do in that exact situation. So you build a connection with somebody who is different to you. And, you know, reading is like no other form. You know, when you watch a movie or a play, you watch characters in a story from the outside. But when you read, you become that character, and you see everything from their perspective, what they see, what they smell, hear, even think. So, you know, you can experience different cultures, religions, identities, family setups, lifestyles. And I think the most important thing is that fiction helps you see that, yes, we're all different, but we all have those same base hopes and fears. We all want to be safe, and we all want to be loved, you know, ultimately. And it does. It expands your worldview and helps you empathize with other lived experiences, for sure. Yeah.
No, I think that's very, very true, and that's a lovely way of putting it. And it kind of brings to mind the fact that Boy Everywhere is being picked as one of the Empathy Reads titles. Do you want to tell people a little bit about that?
About the Empathy Read?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really great initiative where titles are selected, and they make packs of books that encourage empathy. And those packs can be bought by schools or any organisation. And it's a really great opportunity to push books that build empathy to the forefront. So I was really honoured that Boy Everywhere was in that pack, obviously, for this year. And it was one of my dreams, actually. I really, you know, you write and you hope that your book will be received in a certain way. Obviously, the intention was to build empathy with Boy Everywhere. So when it was picked for the Empathy Read campaign, I was delighted. I think that Empathy Day is in June. So that will be a really big event where everybody will celebrate these books, and there'll be a big push. So I'm really looking forward to joining in that too.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that was one of the things that really struck me about Sami, you know, his emotional capacity and range. I always give a bit of a thump in the air when boys have that in fiction. I think it's such a useful way to model positively for boys, when sometimes in the world we're kind of told that you just need to have a stiff upper lip all of the time.
Mm. Yeah.
So thinking about Empathy Reads, I'm conscious that we have teachers and librarians in our audience, and I'm also conscious that there are some fantastic resources available for Boy Everywhere. Can you tell us a little bit about those resources and how people can access them?
Yeah. So if you go to my website under Boy Everywhere resources, we've got I've come up with a list of sort of topics that can be discussed, and how you can link it. Link the book to various curriculum themes like geography, STEM, technology. There's so many aspects. And also there's a teacher's resource guide. I've linked to my publisher in the US has made a set of questions which you can use straight away. They're also developing a pack which will be shared, I think, in just before publication there, but which would also be free and very detailed in terms of, you know, comprehension and really looking at scenes from Sami's perspective and thinking about why he makes the choices he makes, why I might have intended to write a certain scene in a certain way. So they'll be really useful. There's also, I've got a reading up there, you know, thanks for my UK publisher for allowing me to put that up there. And there's a word search and things, etc. Yeah, so there's quite a bit there that teachers can use, and hopefully it will inspire more work. But recently, on Instagram, I was tagged by an educator at home who had read the book with her 8-year-old, and they had drawn a map of his journey for her geography topic. And that was really lovely to see. So I did share that on Instagram. So yeah.
No, that's amazing. And I think that's another case in point of how fiction and reading can kind of teach us in so many different areas, almost accidentally.
Yeah, it's not just English. It's not just comprehension. You can take so much from a story. There are so many themes. Yeah. Definitely.
And it's been brilliant to see the way that Boy Everywhere has captured people's minds and imaginations. It's been selected for many, many different reading promotions, including, of course, our own Litfest Big Read. As you said, it took sort of around about 5 years to work on this. How does it feel now to have so many people reading and responding to your novel?
Absolutely surreal. I just wasn't expecting this response, and I couldn't have hope for more. You know, Sami and his family have been with me for so long, and it's wonderful that I can talk about them and their story openly. I was so excited that children would be finally reading Boy Everywhere, because, you know, I knew that adults would connect to it, but I was nervous about children reading it. But the response has been amazing. I've had children who are reluctant readers pick it up. Librarians have been sharing with me, you know, I've had a boy who came in who really doesn't like reading, and he's taken your book, and then the next day his brother came in and took a book. And some parents, you know, have tweeted to say that their children will not go up and brush their teeth because they want to, you know, read on, and they're going to bed late. Teachers and adults have told me that they were shocked because they never thought themselves about how easily someone could become a refugee, and it had, you know, really changed their perspective. And how they were going to sort of work, even, you know, share their work and talk about things in the future. And children who are really fussy readers have been going to bed late, as I said. And that's just the best thing to hear. I mean, Julia was telling me earlier that one of her friend's sons as well was unable to put the book down. And I cannot believe this. And it's been amazing to also see the different things that people have taken from the story. So I've done a few book clubs, and I've had people ask me if Uncle Muhammad divorces Auntie Fatima, which I really hadn't considered before they asked. So I was really shocked. I was like, wow, you know, people are these characters felt so real. One of my friend's daughters, they have a book club, and she wanted to know if she would, if Auntie Fatima would own up when Uncle Mohammed got home that night. So yeah, and authors, librarians, teachers have donated copies to school libraries, and it really feels as if after so many years that I'm now passing that baton on to readers, and it will hopefully do the work, they will hopefully do the work that I intended the book to do. And it's already become a curriculum text in a few schools. The intention was always for it to encourage discussion, enlighten, and change perceptions. And I cannot express how grateful I am and how incredible it is to see this book doing that. So yeah, thank you everybody.
No, that's brilliant. I know that the book has been published in America. Is it being published, or has it been published in any other territories?
So it has got a deal that I can't talk about right now.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so it's going to be published in America on the 20th of April. And it's been really well received there. I got today I've just announced it, a book list, which is the review journal for the American Library Association. So it's had a starred review for that today. But yeah, there is another territory. It's available in Australia through Old Barn Books. They've got a distribution network there. It's available in English in the Commonwealth as well. But in terms of foreign languages, yeah, still waiting, and I'll share some more news soon.
Fantastic. No, that's really exciting to hear. It's very interesting hearing you talk about reading. It kind of makes me wonder, were you much of a reader as a child? And if so, what kind of books and magazines did you particularly enjoy?
I really love non-fiction. I do vividly remember this encyclopedia. I mentioned Sami's encyclopedia. Well, there's this encyclopedia that was illustrated, and I remember just reading it and fascinated by that. When I'm asked about my favorite book as a child, I can only ever remember the picture, but where's Spot? I really loved it. I read it till I was way too old. I even had a Spot the Dog soft toy. And then as I got older, I loved Funny Bones and The Jolly Postman. I still love those books. And then there's this huge gap where I can't recall any books that I read until I got to secondary school. And one of them was one of my favorites in secondary school was A Brave New World, because that really, I was so shocked by it, and the way that it looks into the future, and the way that it sort of makes you think about the decisions that we make. But recently I went through a bunch of boxes my mum took down from the attic, which contained all my school books, and I found a diary in which I'd started a list of favourite books. I hadn't finished it. And judging by my writing, I'm about 8 years old, and apparently I love The Worst Kids in the World and Charlotte Cheatham. Now, I don't remember this book at all, but it does remind me of a recent celebrity children's writer's title. But this was decades ago. So, I was lucky. I had access to books. My mum was a really big advocate of libraries. I used to go every Saturday. We had the book bus, the travelling library, mobile library come to our street. As in secondary school, I would go to I was the school librarian. I was a helper. And then I used to go to the Central Library to do my research. And also, even at university, I managed to do my whole degree. And I only spent £60 on books because I was the first at the library to take out the books on the list.
Brilliant.
Yeah, my mum taught me well.
No, definitely. And you now, alongside being an author, you're a director of Inclusive Minds, an organisation who seek to increase representation in children's books and in the creation of them. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work with them?
Yeah, so Inclusive Minds is a unique organisation. It's for people who are passionate about inclusion, diversity, equality and accessibility in children's literature. And we've got a big network of inclusion ambassadors from across the country with diverse lived experiences of race, different ethnicities, disabilities, neurodivergence, LGBTQIA, etc. And we give them opportunities to amplify their voices at events, And another strand is that publishers can request to work with one of our inclusion ambassadors to check if the book that they're publishing is authentic. They're not sensitivity readers because we ask publishers to involve them much earlier in the process to help with the development of authentic characters from the very start. And we're also, when we've got more funding, planning to deliver training in the future to anyone who wants to increase authentic representation in their books. So yeah, that's Inclusive Minds. Brilliant,
thank you. And again, we've probably got librarians and teachers in the audience. If people wanted to know more or wanted to find ways that some of the young people that they work with could be involved, how would they go about doing that?
So there's information on the website, and there's a contact form. The network always welcomes any new recruits. We've got people of all ages, including children, young people and families. And if young people have a diverse lived experience and would like to get involved in ensuring authentic representation, we'd love to hear from them. Parents can apply on behalf of their children or as a whole family too. And yeah, there's a form, a simple form, a contact form on the website. And if you fill that in, give your details, express your, lived experience, our administrator will get in touch and welcome them to the network. So yeah, it's inclusiveminds.com.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So thinking about what's next for you as an author, I mean, Boy Everywhere is such a strong, assured debut. It makes me feel really excited about what you're going to be working on next. I wonder whether we can ask you for a bit of a sneaky peek as to what that might be about. Is there anything you can tell us?
Thank you. So I have just written another FRMG novel. It's about a girl whose personal life was turned upside down because of an outside event, much like Sami's life. But this time her school world is rocked and she has to decide whether she accepts how she's treated or takes action to challenge it. And the way I pitch it is it's sort of Thug meets Moxie, but for upper middle grade readers. And it's also ideal for the clean teen fiction market. And I wrote it because of the increasingly prejudiced environment we're living in, where the far right continues to rise and embolden people to show their hatred towards the other. And like Boy Everywhere, it challenges stereotypes, it tackles themes of prejudice and racism in the lives of teens. It's essentially a story about finding your identity and fighting for it. So yeah.
No, that sounds really exciting, and yeah, another book that has a lot of moral complexity there, so I shall certainly look forward to reading that. I wonder, before we sort of move over to questions that the audience might have, could we ask you for another reading, please?
Okay. Do you have any preference where I should read from?
No, I think if you want to choose a part that you feel.
Ooh. Okay. I'll read the bit where Joseph, in chapter 1, Joseph and Sami have just come home. They've had to leave school, and Joseph's dad is just parking up outside their apartment. Joseph's dad parked outside their apartment building. As the car stopped on the smooth black tarmac, we heard what must have been gunshots in the distance, but I always thought it sounded like rain hitting a tin roof, but it wasn't raining. We jumped out, sheltered our heads with our arms, and ran through their black front gates. We raced straight up to Joseph's bedroom, throwing our bags down next to some dried orange peel he hadn't bothered throwing away. I sat on the end of his bed while Joseph switched on his PlayStation and small flat-screen TV. May as well play FIFA if you can't play the real thing, eh? He said, his chin jutting out because of his grumpy face. Yeah, may as well, I said, wishing the trials hadn't been cancelled and that we were showing off the skills we'd been practicing in the stadium instead. There was a small knock on the door and it opened. Hi, you two. Do you want anything to eat? Asked Joseph's mama. Nah, said Joseph, still facing the TV screen, waiting for the game to load. How about you, Sami? No, thanks, Auntie, but can I have a drink, please? Joseph's mama smiled. Sure, what would you like, Coke? Yes, thanks. Shall I call my mama to get Abraham to pick me up? He's probably waiting for me at school. No, she said quickly in a strange, high-pitched voice. Your brother wants you to stay for dinner. Stay there. I'll be right back with that Coke. She pulled the door tight and left. I bit my lip and frowned. Even Auntie was acting weird. I grabbed the remote from Joseph's hand and put it on TV mode. Hey, what are you doing? Shouted Joseph. Shh, just want to check the news, see why Baba got us picked up. Don't you want to know? Not really. All those shows with dead people. Come on, it'll only take a minute. Go on then, said Joseph. I flicked through the channels one by one. Kids, cartoons, music, documentaries, news channel. My head started spinning as I read the headline flashing in red at the bottom of the screen. Damascus Sham City Centre Mall, rebel terrorist bomb attack. I sat staring at the image on the screen. The once shiny glass building is now partly rubble. The glass half of the mall was a broken grey shell, and the concrete half was just barely standing. There were no windows or doors left in any of it, and people in high-vis jackets rushed through the smoke, debris, rows of police cars and ambulances. I watched, but couldn't move. My ears stopped. I could see Joseph's arms waving around next to me. Everything had slowed down. The noise from the TV and Joseph's words muffled. I tried to say something, but nothing came out. The mall had been bombed. Mama and Sarah were there, buying my football boots.
Wow, thank you so much. I think that was a brilliant choice and really conveys the power and the human emotion and tragedy. So yeah, thank you very much indeed for that. We will move over to questions from the audience at this point. This year's festival is slightly different in that we're having to hold it online. It does mean that we've made all of our events available free of charge. If people are willing to make a donation, that would be incredibly helpful to us in terms of our future programming, being able to bring high quality events to Lancaster. So that would be amazing. And we will now move over to questions from the audience. So do please keep typing your questions into the question box. First of all, Laz, was it important that there are different religions represented in the book? This is from Letty Hawthorne, and she says she's training to be an interfaith minister, so these elements tend to jump out at her.
Yes, as I said, I really wanted to portray how life is actually in the Middle East, in Syria especially. You've got people of all faiths living side by side. It really is a really inclusive country. They received refugees from all around the world centuries ago. They harbored people from all sorts of places. Most recently Iraq, after the Iraq war. They've got a Jewish quarter. They've got a really good population of Christians and Muslims, of both the sects, Shia and Sunni, and they've never, until the war, nobody clashed, nobody fought. They all lived together harmoniously. Lots of Muslims celebrate Christmas. Even now, it's just like here where they get together as families, they have a holiday. No one knows this. So I really, really wanted to show this. They have different beliefs. Just like here, people have different beliefs, but we all celebrate each other's, and we respect each other's beliefs. And it's just like that there too. Nobody is going around with a gun killing each other because of, their faith. It's just not like that. Obviously, it got out of hand when ISIS came along, and Syrians hated them. I know one of my friends. He said, "I'd hung on in Aleppo until I saw these people with these black bags, and that was it. I knew we had to leave, and that's when they left." So yeah, it affects everybody. So yeah, they do live harmoniously.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a very considered answer and a really interesting question there. So thank you, Letty. We've got a question from our own Saul Argent, and he's saying the book is such a brilliant way into a very difficult subject for young readers, and is wondering how you approach writing about this in a way that was both accessible and engaging for children.
Ooh. I guess getting into Sami's head and really seeing things from his perspective, and how things happen around children all the time, but they don't necessarily understand them. And I wanted to sort of show how blanketed some children's lives are, many of them will not explain to their children what's going on. You know, when I explained earlier about my friends' children asking why are there plumes of smoke, why can we hear that? Because it was distant in Damascus and the suburbs, but they were aware mildly. And obviously as the years went on, after 2016 as well. And, you know, they just said, oh, it's fireworks. Parents genuinely said that. And they wouldn't let them watch the news. Now, that is what I would do as a parent in England. You know, I would do that. I would protect my children as long as I could so they could continue living and not worrying and having anxiety about something. So I guess getting into his head and really sort of showing things as he saw them and learning about things as he did. And, you know, through the editing, I was lucky because I sent it to a lot of people and the critiques were, how did he know this? So I would then go back and think, okay, I've not put this on the page properly. So I would go back and edit it. I don't know if that answers your question properly. But I guess it was just really trying to think like a young person. And also my sons, they read the book and helped to help when they didn't understand something. They were my first beta readers.
No, I think that's a really good answer. Yeah, I think that getting into the head of the characters is a brilliant way of being able to sort of frame quite difficult and complex issues. Following on from that, we've got a question from Mariam, and she's asking, how did you feel while writing the very emotional parts, and whether you felt it was important to include them to help promote empathy amongst readers?
The most difficult parts for me by far were the boat scene and the lorry scene, because they were real and I had to make them feel real. These were things that actually happened to people and people have experienced these. So they were so difficult to write and get right. And I felt I had to write them because we have been shown these news stories about lorries, about refugees tumbling out of them, about refugees in dinghy boats. We've seen Ayan washed up on the shore. So I wanted to show how it feels to be the person experiencing it, not from the outside, not from us looking at the story, but really, really experiencing it. So I felt compelled to write them. I couldn't avoid them. I don't think it would have been right to have avoided them. And that was one of the reasons that I had to, because they were middle class. That's why it was one of the reasons that Sammy's dad's money is lost and he can't get it out from Lebanon, which is true. A lot of people's money is held up in Lebanon because of financial crisis. And I had to do that because I wanted them to lose everything and experience the boat and lorry journey, because with that lifestyle, you normally wouldn't. You'd get a better boat, you'd be able to. But I had to make it sort of suffer that way because I wanted to show that the common journey that so many refugees have taken, no matter what class they're from, a working class or middle class, etc. So yeah, the lorry scene, it was so dark and heavy, and I found it really difficult to edit as well each time because it was just a really dark scene. Yeah, very difficult. But it made me really passionate. That's why I was so desperate to get this book published. And I cried about it for 5 years, literally. I've done my family's head in because they were so relieved when it was published. I'm like, yes, it's over. She won't cry now. But yeah, that's why I was really passionate to get it published, because these were the stories of other people. These were the stories of people that have lived this. And I wanted everyone to really experience it like them. But yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got another question here from Gareth, and he's saying, which is lovely to hear, that his 11-year-old daughter has really loved reading your book and is watching at the moment. So hello to her.
I remember his daughter. He tweeted a few weeks ago.
And his daughter Megan is wondering if there might be a film based on the book.
Oh, hello, Megan. I wish and I hope so. Nothing yet, but it has gone out to a film agent. So let's see. I don't know how long these things take. It could be a while. You maybe even have left university by the time something happens. That's how long these things can take, but I hope so. I would love that. A lot of people have said they can see it as a movie, and I would love that, yeah. And I would love Syrian people to act in it too. That would be amazing.
Brilliant. Let's keep our fingers firmly crossed. So we've got another question here. This is from Jago, who's 10. And they are asking, can you tell us any more about Ali's story and what it was like for him meeting Sami?
What a lovely question. I love Ali. I absolutely love Ali. He's one of my favourite characters because he's just somebody that I can see in a UK school right now. And I would hope that all the children that read this would hope to be like Ali, because he saves Sami just by offering to play football and to come and play FIFA, you know? He just that little offering. What was the question again? Why did I write Ali? Sorry.
So it was, they were wanting to know a bit more about Ali's story and what it was like for him meeting Sami. So
Ali really sort of, he was obviously initially forced into looking after this new kid and not overly happy about it. But he has that conversation with him, doesn't he, when he asks him, where are you from? And he's really surprised. And then he realizes that Sami's sort of upset. He senses that. And he can connect because he's had a difficult time himself. He's also felt like he didn't belong. And so he reaches out to him and asks him to, he sees that he's a bit lonely and reaches out to him. Yeah, and they're going to go on to be really good friends. They're going to go on to be friends through their secondary school and doing lots together. So that's Ali, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think we've probably just got time for one more fairly quick one. This is from Bibi, and she is asking, what has been your proudest moment on your journey?
Oh, Bibi, I don't know. I think really, genuinely, just hearing that people have, it's opened people's eyes. You know, when people tell me that they didn't ever see things from this perspective, they didn't ever think that about what refugees had left behind. That's, I think, for me, the biggest achievement. And all the other big things that have happened all along have been absolutely incredible. I just still to this day, I can't believe that they've happened to me. It feels like it's happening to somebody else. I sort of share it, don't I? But I don't think it sort of sits in my head that it's happened. And also I'm very aware that, you know, a writer's journey for a book is just for that book. So I'm just enjoying it and making the most of it while I can. But yeah, proudest moment is readers, connecting with readers and getting their feedback. It's amazing.
I think that is, yeah, that's so fundamental to the whole sort of experience, isn't it? And it feels a really nice point on which to end. Thank you so much, Az, for joining us this evening and being so generous with your time. I'm going to hand over to Julie Bell now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for interviewing me.
Hi. Thank you so much, Az, for that. It was absolutely such a brilliant start to our literature festival. We can't thank you enough. And I've been reading all the chat down the side. There's been people tweeting. You've had all the questions. People have been saying just how much they've really enjoyed it. You've made their Friday night, and it's been such a wonderful, joyous event listening to you speak. If people haven't read your book, they can take part in the Litfest Big Read, and I'm sure that you'll have got everybody engaged with it tonight that's heard you. And people can hear you again by going on our YouTube channel, which will be another fantastic opportunity if they missed it. Got some great feedback down the side, Az, so you're getting it as we go along. I think, you know, your whole passion for this book and your commitment to spending 5 years writing it is absolutely phenomenal. So thank you for sharing your story with us tonight and with everybody else that's going to be able to hear it. I really do hope people engage with it. And if you want to buy the book, Litfest have got it on our bookshop website, and you'll even get a signed copy, because Az is going to sign some, by the magic of the postal system, is going to sign some book plates for us, and we'll put those in that book. So it will be a very special book from a very special event. And don't forget, we hate to keep asking you this, but if we want to do more events like this and see more wonderful authors like Az, you know, please, you know, donate to the festival, and we can do many more events like this. So that's the conclusion of tonight's first event, and we hope to see you at all our other events as they come online during the week. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.